Now, since the migrant crisis began in August, thousands of people have fled countries including Iraq, Syria and Afghanistan. Many are now trapped at the Belarus-Poland border. Between 2,000 and 4,000 people have been stranded for weeks in the cold without food, water or humanitarian aid, and temperatures are dropping. A one-year-old Syrian boy is believed to be the youngest victim among 13 people reported to have died. Poland and its Western allies say Belarus is using the crisis to destabilize the European Union in retaliation against sanctions. President Alexander Lukashenko denies the accusations. But humanitarian groups accuse Poland's government of violating international human rights law by pushing asylum seekers back into Belarus. Well, joining us now on the News Hour, live from Strasburg, is Radosław Sikorski, who's a member of the European Parliament and former Polish foreign minister. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us on Al Jazeera. Please help us understand Poland's actions first, because seeking asylum is not a crime, it's a human right. Why is the Polish government preventing these refugees and migrants from entering its territory to seek asylum when, under international law, it's obligated to allow them due process to assess what their needs are?
I speak as a former refugee myself. When we had a military dictatorship in Poland in the 1980s, and I was given asylum in the United Kingdom. But we do need to understand the origins of this crisis. Mr. Lukashenko abrogated the readmission treaty with the European Union, then abolished visas with Iraq, with Jordan, with several other countries, and then gave the green light to people smugglers to bring those migrants to Belarus. Also remember that Belarus, from the migrants' point of view, is a safe country. It's a dictatorship, all right. It's not safe for Belarusians, but there were people from Afghanistan, Iraq and elsewhere studying there before this crisis. Mr. Lukashenko is trying to do what President Erdogan of Turkey did in 2015, which is to force the European Union into a negotiation and to pay him for stopping the operation of sending the refugees across the lines.
Mr. Sikorski, regardless of Belarus's motivations, or as you say, understanding the origins of the crisis, Poland does have obligations under international law. It's in contravention of its international human rights obligation when it prevents migrants and refugees from entering its territory. Human rights groups are not just criticizing Belarus and its actions, but also Poland, which is a member of the European Union. Shouldn't Poland fulfill its obligations under EU law, obligations that it agreed to when it joined the bloc, regardless of what Belarus is trying to achieve?
Look, I'm not a spokesman for the current Polish government. I'm in opposition to it. And yes, it should have created reception centers right on the border for asylum claims to be processed quickly, in a matter of hours rather than weeks, so that people who have a hope of getting it could be admitted to resettlement centers and others sent back home speedily. Yes, that should have been done months ago, I agree.
Okay, so would you agree then that the reality here is that Poland's government, through this crisis, perhaps wants to divert attention from some of the critical issues that it's facing today, things like its dispute with the European Commission over the rule of law, the parliamentary majority of the government becoming slimmer? Isn't the government, the Polish government, also trying to capitalize on this migrants crisis politically?
Oh, yes, there's definitely an element of that, because it could have asked, or at least accepted, the assistance of the European Union and of Frontex months ago. The reason why the migrants are now going home is that the European Union asked airlines, particularly from the Middle East, not to fly people one way to Minsk. So you're right that internally, this crisis has been somewhat useful to the current Polish government, but it did not ask for these migrants to try to cross the border. And, in the European Union, we have the so-called Schengen zone. once you cross the external border of the EU, you can move around the European Union without passports, without visas, without any checks whatsoever. For this system to work, the external perimeter has to be controlled. You know, countries have visas. Countries have the right to regulate who comes in and who doesn't. But of course, there should be these reception centers at the border crossings where people should be able to apply for asylum.
So how do you see this crisis being resolved? The Polish government has said it's experiencing what is called a hybrid war led by Belarus and Russia. Is that a view also shared by the European Commission in Brussels, where you are? And if so, how then do you resolve it?
Yes, it is. The President of the Commission has given strong public support to Frontex and to Poland in protecting the EU border. And remember, Lukashenko said publicly that he will give Poland a hard nose, as he put it. This is a deliberate operation to inconvenience, to intimidate the European Union. Remember, he forced an EU plane to land in Minsk in order to arrest an opposition leader. And there is an unprecedented wave of repressions in Belarus after Mr. Lukashenko stole the presidential election last year. The political context is important, and one just feels sorry for the unfortunate people who are victims of lies by the people smugglers, first of all, and by the government of Belarus, which is assisting the people smugglers in this operation. Agencies of the Belarus regime behave like a people smuggling mafia.
Right. Indeed, it is the people and these migrants who are the victims of all of this, not just from Belarus, but again from Poland, when they're not being allowed in and when they're being tear gassed and having water cannon fired on them by Polish border guards. Thank you very much for speaking to us, sir. We really appreciate your time. Radosław Sikorski, former Foreign Minister of Poland, joining us there from Strasbourg.